Morning everyone, thanks for joining us. I have the time as 10:30, but I am going to give it just another minute to wait for some of the other attendees to also join us, and then we'll get started. There you go. Morning everyone. I have the time now as 1 minute past, well actually 10:31, so time for us to start our Cloud Connect event today. We are joined today by Marek Suchocki from Autodesk, as well as Anin, who's the lovely lady sitting next to me, and Nuran, who will be handing over to at a later part of this presentation. So this is BIM 360 Cloud Connect Part 2. If you have missed out on Part 1, don't worry about it. We will bring you up to speed. From an agenda point of view, we're just going to touch over the welcome and the intro, which we're already a part of. And then I will run through a summary of the Cloud Connect event. I'm Jani Viljoen. And after that, we're going to hand over for the look at the International BIM Standards, presented by Marek from Autodesk. I think that's really why you are all here today in any case. And then finally, my lovely two BIM ladies, Amin and Nuran, is going to run through BIM 360 docs and the ISO standard in action to see how we can put that in practice. At the end, we will have a Q&A and closing session. But once Marek has completed his part of the presentation, I will also allow for questions to be asked directly to him related to the content that he has just shared. So I want to kick us off by just saying that actually we'd like to hear from you for us to get a better sense of how well do you know Baynes and the types of services that we offer, as well as did you attend the first Cloud Connect event, because that will give me a better idea in terms of how much detail I should go onto for that. So I'm going to go ahead and launch one of our polls in here for you to please give us some feedback. There you go. You should see that poll popping up on your screen. If you can do us a favor and please give us your feedback. Great, so far a lot of people know us quite well, which means we don't have to go into too much detail of everything that we can do to help our customers. I do see there's some don't really know us that well. If you don't really know us that well and you still joined today, thank you very much. We welcome you to our Baynes family. I'm going to give that about 20 more seconds just to allow some of the other attendees to also provide us some answers to the poll. Thanks, everyone. A lot of people who already know us very well, welcome. Thanks for joining. Okay. We're at about 80% of people who voted so far, so 2 more seconds and then I'm going to switch to the next question that we have for you. Great, thanks everyone. Second question, that's it for the poll. I won't be asking you too many questions. This is really a chance for you to ask us questions rather. But we do also just want to see if you attended our first Cloud Connect event, which I think was held in July, if I remember correctly, when we were all stuck at home still. If you missed out on that first Cloud Connect event, it is also recorded and available on our YouTube channel. This same session will also be available on our YouTube channel from probably next week onwards, if you want to share that with any of your colleagues or anyone that you think can benefit from it. Great, that was a nice and short and sweet one. Thank you everyone for your feedback. Great, so there's quite a lot of you that said you didn't actually attend the first Cloud Connect event, so I'm going to give you a quick summary and recap of what we covered in that first event. So our first BIM 360 Cloud Connect event really was an online panel discussion. We were joined by the likes of Lombard Consulting, GLH Architects, Gap Architects, and TV3. And the panel that we had was mostly a couple of different ladies, as well as Carl, who joined us, to really talk about their experiences in using BIM 360 Docs and BIM 360 Design. And at that point, we were in the middle of a much harder lockdown. So, you know, the way that we worked was quite different to what we were used to before. In this previous Cloud Connect session, we really looked at 2020 and where we were this far. And so far at that stage, it really was all about working from home, but still staying connected, obviously saving costs because of the impacts of this pandemic. But everyone had to keep designing. We had to keep pushing forward. If we fast forward to now, almost end of October, luckily we can move around and drink some wine again, but we still have a very similar kind of landscape. I think most of us are at a point where it's kind of work from home and from the office. I find that a lot of people are now having to juggle the differences between these two working environments. We still need to stay connected, and we still need to manage the vast amounts of data that we have on our projects. That's not reduced by everything that happened this year so far. Cost savings, I think that is always something. I can probably put this on a slide related to 2019, 2020, 2021. Cost savings will always be a priority. And then lastly, we needed to keep designing, but I think a lot of us found ourselves in a place where we had to fast track projects to try and keep up and try and catch up with everything that we had lost out when construction was closed for a couple of months earlier this year. So this is my perception of where we currently are, more or less, in terms of what is going on in the country. Then in our previous Cloud Connect event, we also had a look at a bit of a BIM 360 overview. And I thought it would be good to include it here, because when we start talking about a common data environment, being an Autodesk partner, we would refer to BIM 360 because it's the one that we recommend. But the BIM 360 platform, yes, sure, it's document management and it's all around your project data. And I think that a lot of people might have a concept, an idea that it really is, you know, it's more for your Revit models and for the designers to have a fancy FTP site. But if we have a look at the BIM 360 platform overall, with all the different modules that it includes, it really has different tools and functionalities, from design to your tasks, your defects, your project management, planning, and ultimately handover. And because all of this is built on Autodesk's Forge system, it means that it's an open platform, and we see a lot of different companies starting to develop additional add-ons on top of this. So really, it's not just for the CAD users, the contractor, the project manager, the QS, a lot of other individuals on projects can also really benefit from the BIM 360 platform. Then to just summarize the different BIM 360 entitlements, and this is not all of it, there is also a BIM 360 plan and BIM 360 ops, but for the purposes of today, I'm just going to give you a quick summary of these. BIM 360 docs which is what Anina and Nuran will chat about more towards the end of this presentation. I think some of the attendees are quite familiar with that. That is really what I refer to as the foundation of the BIM 360 system. This is our document management platform. This is where we share our files, where our documents all sit, where we can do some reporting and analytics on that. And this is something that I think everyone on the project team should ideally have access to. And then building on top of that is BIM 360 design. Easily, if I had to explain it in a summary for the individuals in the built environment, this is Revit Cloud work sharing. Although it does also have great functionalities for the Civil 3D and the Plant 3D users that has been included. So this is really something that's used by the designers or the Revit users on a project. Then we've got BIM 360 Coordinate. Again, it all sits on top of that BIM 360 Docs foundation. And this is where we can start doing some of our coordination and our clash detection and really start figuring out how can we solve most of our coordination issues before we even go to site. Then BIM 360 Build, again, it builds on the document management foundation. And this is where we start involving our contractors a lot, because this is the module that connects the office to the field, where we see your RFIs, your snag lists, your daily logs, all those types of functionalities sit within BIM 360 Build. But for the purposes of today, since we're talking mostly about a common data environment, and I believe that BIM 360 Docs is the foundational module of that, your BIM 360 Docs gives you access to all of your project documents, plans, models, Excel spreadsheets, PDF, everything in a single data repository. You can control your viewing, your sharing of information, version tracking, which we'll touch on. Like I mentioned, it supports different types of file formats, not just the standard, here's a CAD file or here's a Revit file. I always think it's great that it does have mobile access, so I like to call it a project in your pocket. You can have access to everything that's going on your project as long as you have a smartphone, which you probably do. So in summary, from a BIM 360 point of view, it really is all about your document management and some collaboration with your team as well. So that being said, now that we have a brief understanding of the Autodesk BIM 360 offering, I want to focus on this panel discussion that we had earlier this year and some of the insights and the comments that we got out of this panel discussion. So one of the first questions that we had asked the panel is, what advice would you give to someone who's considering using a BIM 360? And that could be docs, design, build, whatever the case is. The main thing is probably just to jump in and commit. And what a lot of the panel had experienced is, because of the lockdown, a lot of us were kind of forced to jump in and to commit to using a different way of collaborating and a different way of document sharing, because we were working from home and we didn't really have any other choice. Something else that also stood out when we had a discussion around what advice would you give to others who is considering this would be to make sure that you get the training and the assistance with the implementation. And I think that also stemmed across the lockdown period, where a lot of people had to get up and running very quickly. And if we are looking at the state of a lot of projects at the moment, where we need to, get up and running and fast track, getting the right help in the beginning is something that the panel said is very valuable. Set things up right from the start. If you have the opportunity to make sure that everything is set up right from the start, it is going to help you a lot during the rest of that process of adopting BIM 360. And then another thing that I think all of the members from our panel, as well as some of you attending today, can definitely agree on is that you will need to change some of your old ways of working. If you were used to, completely managing projects and project information on a more traditional system or in a more traditional way, know that if you are moving over to a common data environment like BIM 360, and if you're even considering having a look at the guidelines in ISO 19650 series, you will need to change some of your old ways of working and your mindset and your thinking about that. Then one of the second questions that we also asked our panel were, what are some of the key benefits using BIM 360 has provided to you and your project teams? And there were mixed answers, but all really focusing on the same thing, is that there's one place for all of your project information. There's no more searching for things. We spend a lot of our daily lives searching for information, whether that is finding an email. Some of you perhaps had to go and search for the invite to this event today. We spend a lot of time searching for different information, and that is something that our panel said has really improved since they started using BIM 360. Improved collaboration with other consultants who are also on Revit. Working from home or from anywhere really is much easier now, because we're not reliant on having access to the server or the central model not playing well on the server and that type of thing. And then always have access to the information that you can view and that you can comment on models right then and there. Like I mentioned, having to pick up your phone and see it there, or if you're sitting at home and the rest of your team is in the office, you can see what they're doing, and you can also provide some feedback on that. Then one of the other questions that we also asked our panel and that we had a discussion about was, given the increased demand for remote working and collaboration, how will you be adapting your traditional process and data sharing processes? I think that, throughout the course of the South African lockdown, there's a lot of things that's changed that was very uncomfortable for probably all of us, but we can also learn from that and take some of what we've learned and implement it in the way going forward. So this question was for me to really get a sense of the panel and get a sense of our customers, in the industry, to see, once everything goes back to normal and we get to sit in the office, are you going to go back to traditional processes? And overall, the answer to that was really no. Some people were considering moving their entire office to BIM 360. Some of the panel also said that they're in a process of learning more about BIM 360 to see how they can get the most out of it and how they can really make it work for their projects. And then also, changing the thinking and evaluating some of those traditional processes to see how it can be changed and updated and improved to suit how technology and standards are moving forward. Great, so everyone who said you missed out on the first Cloud Connect event, now I've brought you up to speed. Next bit, and I'm going to hand over to Marek shortly, who's going to just have a look at some of the international BIM standards and specifically the ISO 19650 standard. But before I jump onto that, I just have, and this is the final poll, this is the last time I'm going to ask you a question, but I think we just want to get a little bit of an idea of how familiar you are with this. So I'm going to go ahead and launch that. If you can give us an indication of, have you heard of it before? And if you haven't, you're definitely in the right place. Great, thanks for voting, guys. I'm going to give it about 20 more seconds. So far, we're a mix between haven't really heard of it before, that's why I'm here, and I've heard of it, but I don't really know what to do with it, and what do I do next? How do I bring this into practice and actually apply all of this? Great, thanks everyone. I think we have all voted now. There you go. Thank you. So next, I'm going to hand over to Marek. Marek is the Autodesk Infrastructure Industry Engagement Lead for EMEA, mostly working with civil infrastructure clients. It's probably because he holds a degree in civil engineering, as a chartered engineer, IT professional. He's a fellow on the British Computer Society. He's a fellow on the Institute of the Civil Engineers. He's a member of the Chartered Institution of Civil Engineering Surveyors. Very impressive so far, Marek. He also sits on multiple different committees, the Digital Transformation Panel, the UK BIM Technology Alliance Group. And then I think in the context of today, Marek is also part of the British Standards Committee, and they were quite involved in authoring the UK BIM standards, which subsequently leaded into the ISO 19650 standard series. So definitely a lot of experience when it comes to standards. Marek, I'm going to stop sharing my screen now and hand over the screen to you. There you go. Thanks, Marek. Over to you.
Thank you. I'm just going to launch my presentation. Please, Jani, can you confirm that you can see this?
Almost.
Yep.
Waiting to view Marek's screen. There you go.
We're all good, yes? Okay. Do interrupt me if there's any problems.
I will do.
Yeah. So firstly, thank you very much for a very gracious introduction. As Jani said, I am the Infrastructure Industry Engagement Lead based in the UK. Unfortunately, I am unable to travel quite so freely just at the moment, as everybody's having these interesting COVID times. So I would have loved to have been in South Africa in a face-to-face session, but at least this way we can actually tackle a geographically dispersed audience by doing this presentation online. So I'm going to cover, so I'm going to cover a whole story around ISO 19650, but I'm going to kick off really discussing why should we have these standards, because, you know, for some people standards are a bit of a frustration and they get in the way of their work, in their opinion. I'll discuss the UK standard, then move on to ISO 19650. I'll spend a bit of time on the common data environment, which is at the heart of this, and actually, as Jani said, is what BIM 360 Docs can deliver as a technology, but I want to explain how it should work. And then I'll just talk about how Autodesk and its partners, such as Baynes, can actually support you in adopting ISO 19650 and CDEs. And I'll leave you hopefully with a little call to action and some useful links that should subsequently follow into the remainder of this online session. So why do we need these BIM standards? Well, industry inefficiencies are extremely well documented over the years. In the UK, we spent a lot of time reflecting on what we could have done better and why we should improve. And this goes back, you know, in 1964, there was a report by Banwell about inflexible contracts and the way that professional conventions are adversarial and stop us modernizing. Sir John Egan published the Rethinking Construction report in '98. Which is actually the first time that the idea of modeling and standardized components, as well as offsite manufacturing, were advocated as a way to improve productivity. The US published a report in 2004 talking about 16 billion of lost interoperability costs, of which 2/3 were borne by the investors, the owners. And then even in Germany, they had what they called their little black book of contracts, where they identified that the construction sector was performing below par. And I'm sure you've all got stories in South Africa where you wonder how you ever managed to complete a project because things were done so poorly. And here's just another one about productivity, which is kind of a repeated message that our productivity it lags most other industry sectors. 3 out of 5 projects are completed late, and 30 to 35% inefficiency. Clients accept the cheapest price, creating a situation where tenderers would submit lowest bids and make it up by reducing quality or making claims. And those words aren't actually from that graph. They're in fact from a report that was published in 1944. So, you know, why has it taken us nearly 80 odd years and we haven't done anything to address the inherent faults in our industry? And I think it comes down to the fact that we have some standardized workflows that everybody assumes are the way we should do stuff. But we have introduced new technologies such as BIM, which I think can help us move forward. And the UK, we were probably one of the first to really recognize this. Some of you will have seen this, the BIM wedge that was published by colleagues of mine on the British Standards Committee, Mark Bew and Mervyn Richards, where we talked about this maturity moving from CAD to 2D and 3D managed CAD, and then using managed BIM, and into a future level 3, and we've stopped using the language of levels and level 3 because we don't really know what the thing on the right hand side might be, because it's a work in progress. But the idea was, let's use BIM software, manage it in a controlled process, and we'll call that level 2. And that was a target for April 2016 for UK government central projects to specify this as a workflow that they expected the supply chain to deliver against. Clearly, when you start out on a journey like that, there's a lot of unknowns, and so we've set about preparing a lot of guidance for different aspects of the industry. So looking at BIM in projects, BIM in operations, how can we help education, how do the owner operators brief the project more effectively. And so these reports all came out, and many of them are still available for free at the UK BIMframework.org, which is the movement that is carrying on the BIM promotion within the UK. And that's actually a conglomeration of the Centre for Digital Built Britain at the University of Cambridge, the British Standards Institute, and the UK BIM Alliance. And I'm involved in all 3 of those separate organisations, but particularly British Standards, as well as UK BIM Alliance. So, feel free to go to that website. There's a lot of good material you'll be able to download from there that is still valid, and actually more and more of it related to ISO 19650. And one of the reasons that we were pleased with ourselves is that actually we got strong engagement from different central government departments. We tested out on projects, and there was a repeated message that costs were coming down and quality was going up. So that kind of has led to us continuing this push to include BIM in our central government funded capital projects, as well as local and private sector. So let's move on to ISO 19650. The UK, as I say, we were kind of pleased with that. We've done a good job, and we offered these standards that I showed you before as candidates to the international community. And the reasons were the ones I've just mentioned. Let's improve the process, let's improve quality, let's get more value from our taxpayer investments, let's focus on better project outcomes. Because we saw that this was already happening, and there's a statistic there of the Cookham Wood prison of 20% cost savings identified. So that's not a trivial amount of money for what would have been a modest upfront investment to introduce BIM into those projects. So if you track the projects effectively and you follow a consistent process, you can achieve these benefits. And so this has now led to the international community embracing our approach and publishing the ISO 19650 series. The first ones came out at the end of 2018 around BIM concepts and principles for information management, and then information management on projects using BIM. This summer, we've released part 3 for information management using BIM in asset operations, part 5 around the security considerations when you use BIM. And that's really down to, please don't share stuff that shouldn't be out there, because you may be working on a critical asset, for example, and information can't just be released. And there is a new project also going on for ISO 19650 Part 4 around data exchange standards. And this is going to take a bit of work. It may come out late next year, but I'm suspecting it will be 2022. And this isn't just being done by the UK, it is obviously being done by an international community of standards experts as well. At the heart of the ISO 19650 process is the idea that this is a quality standard. So it's not about modeling as such, it's really about the quality management process, and it sits really under the ISO 55000 series for asset management and 21500 for project management, all of which themselves are really subservient to ISO 9001. And I'm sure pretty much all of you within your organizations have some sort of ISO 9001 processes. So all we're really talking about here is managing information during the capital and operational phases of built assets. And that little jigsaw piece there really shows how what we want to see is information coming out of already operated assets. If it's a government owner of multiple buildings, they will have some data, so they should give you that at point A when you start your project. You then use that to begin your project development through phase B, which is the actual project. And then when you finish the project and it's accepted, you hand back some of the data at point C that will then be used in operation. So there's a virtuous circle of information handover and hand back. Who's this for, by the way? Well, it's for everybody. So whether you're an owner, you're a designer, you're a supply chain contractor, you can participate in the process. and it's all about collaboration. So let's make sure that we manage how the information moves from one party to another, and that every party knows what purpose they can use this information. This is going to be my real kind of idiot's guide to ISO 19650 if you're not familiar with it. So the appointing party, apologies, the language has changed from like standard like employer or client. The idea is that everybody effectively could be an appointing party because you may subcontract works. So the end appointing party would typically be the employer or the client. So they establish what we call an exchange information requirements. This is the information I need through the life cycle of the project in this format at these phases, so that I can make decisions on whether we should proceed or make adjustments. The supply chain, potential bidders, they prepare a BIM execution plan, which actually highlights how they will deliver that information. Yes, of course, it might talk about the modeling applications, but really it's there to say, we'll give you that information you need in the way you've requested by following these processes and using these tools. The appointing party then assesses the capability of all the bidders and picks the one that they believe is the most capable of doing their work, and they have an agreement. And then we have what we would do, the post-contract BIM execution plan, which is enhanced by what we would describe as a master information delivery plan, that itself is also composed of task information delivery plans, which are the real discrete details of who will do what and when with what tools at each phase of the project to deliver that information requirement. And only once we've done all of this planning and everybody signed up to it, do we actually start designing anything. And you know, I speak to a lot of architects who really hate this, because architects are very creative individuals and they really want to start drawing and designing the moment they get appointed, where this process really says, no, you've got to start planning. Because if you fail to plan, you plan to fail, is the old adage. So once you've done your models, you also create the data that was requested in the EIR, and then you check, does it meet the EIR? If no, sorry, you don't move forward, you improve that data. If yes, you just carry on the process and move through the life cycle of the project until you eventually complete and hand back that data that was needed, as well as the delivered asset, to your appointing party. And that, in a nutshell, is BIM according to ISO 19650. Let's look at the common data environment, which is a real core to the concepts within the 19650 series. So a common data environment is a process, and it can be enabled with technology or supported through technology. We don't have to. You could potentially do this as a paper process, but I highly wouldn't recommend it. The idea being that each of the task teams, they do their work in progress, and when they're ready, they will do a check, review, approve, and then release it to share with others, who then bring it into their work in progress and iteratively develop the project until, at a point in time, the task teams confirm that it's ready to be published for a given use. So maybe for costing, or for manufacture, or for construction. So you effectively kind of you develop it in WIT, confirm it's good enough to share, and when everybody's done enough work to meet a stage gate deliverable, you can then publish it. And the archive is there is just as a record of what was actually shared and published, to ensure that, you know, should we have contractual issues downstream, we can actually uncover why decisions were taken and who did them. So it's really critical to remember that there are these check, review, approve, and review authorized processes as part of this. You can't just share information without going through some internal or group checks. How does this work in practice? Well, this is a real kind of step-by-step guide. So it all starts, as I said, that point A on that jigsaw piece, where the appointing party shares some information. So they say, look, this is what we've got, this is what we know about the project. And then the first party, in this case, as an example, an architect, takes some of that information and they go ahead and they develop their first draft drawings or models. It doesn't really matter what we're talking about here, because it works just as effectively for both. And they do a check, review, approve, and then they share it. And then the other parties on the project, they then take some of that data, as well as perhaps some of the stuff that the appointing party shared, and they too create their first instances and share accordingly. So then everybody brings their respective work together and as reference information, and carry on developing the process. Sometimes they don't actually end up sharing something because it hasn't met anything, so we keep it within our own environment. But eventually they again share things. Everybody does, you know, the usual kind of, I'll take a copy of yours, you take a copy of mine, and we work collaboratively together. But we all know that everything that's being shared is being shared with a given intent. At some point we go, I think this is ready to go out for publication. So the lead appointing party, so this could be a joint venture contractor lead, or it could be the design team lead. They say, no, this is ready to go out for publication. And it then goes into the published state where the appointing party is obliged to accept it. And then we click through and carry on the same process until effectively, we reach the end of our project and we've handed over everything that we need. So effectively, this is this sort of iterative development. Now that's how it might work within a single delivery team. I'm just going to do an example without the work in progress state, showing how this might work across many project teams. So whether this is a large capital project with lots of subcontracts or a client managing a real estate, it doesn't really matter. This is how the whole logic should still work. So the appointing party, they'll have their asset information management system, their AIM, which will include lots of linked enterprise systems. And what they'll do is at the beginning of a project, they'll share it with their first delivery team. So they share what needs to be shared. And as we showed before, that team goes off and develops some information, which at some point becomes ready for publishing. And again, the appointing party is accepted. Now, what happens if they have a secondary contract? So maybe there were some dependencies between the two projects. So the appointing party actually shares not only some of their asset information model data, but also the outputs from delivery team 1. And then delivery team 2 goes off and starts preparing their work, and they too reach a stage when it's ready for publication. And that information in itself part of it may get shared back to delivery team 1 because there are dependencies, and this happens quite regularly that we're waiting for them to give us the information. And everybody goes around preparing their data, following these authorization procedures, and at some point in time we then publish information into the AIM, because delivery team 1's work is sufficiently good to both share with delivery team 2 because it's not going to get any further, but also it's now complete and can go into the asset information management system. It might get changed and consumed into like a Maximo or a Esri GIS because it's going to be used in a different form in operation, but effectively it's been now accepted. And the same will be true for delivery team 2's information, that at some point in time it or some of it will also be fit for purpose to go off into operations. So hopefully that wasn't too complicated to understand, but really the CDE is really all about controlling information preparation and use through the life cycle and sharing between different teams as well as back to the asset owner. So moving forward then, how can Autodesk and its partners help you embrace these ISO 19650 concepts as well as adopt a common data environment? Well, really there's 3 ways. So one is we provide solutions. We can offer you resources to help you, and we can provide services that will accelerate how you adopt. Let's start with those solutions. I mean, Autodesk has an unmatched portfolio of technologies. After all, ISO 19650 is about BIM, and it would be a tough argument to suggest that anyone can offer a richer portfolio than we can across every discipline within the built environment project process. We also have our collaborative working portfolio. The BIM 360 tools that you'll hear about more later are at the heart of this. So we can help you irrespective of what process or discipline you undertake through the life cycle of a project by helping you manage information. And let me quickly look at BIM 360 as a common data environment. So we saw the common data environment process. So some of the things that are in there, and this is actually quite closely related to the UK National Annex, where we talk about consistent file naming or container naming. Now, these requirements are obligatory in the UK, but some of them, particularly the ones on the right-hand side, are the ones that ISO 19650 says you must include with every container or file or folder. And we can actually handle this within BIM 360. We can provide these field names, and they'll be revealed then within a folder view of BIM 360. And I'm pleased to say that we're investing heavily into doing some improvements around this. So if you watch Autodesk University, there may be some announcements around how this gets even enhanced further. Looking at the audit trail, who did what and when was something I revealed. Project admins can identify who did what and when because they've got all the information needed there readily available, and obviously when it took place. Permission-based access. Obviously, I mentioned ISO 19650 Part 5 is about data security. You need to make sure that the right parties are given access to the right information at the right time, and we can manage that using a permission control system within a BIM 360 docs, and then you can actually see who's got the read, view, and write permissions to different areas within a project folder hierarchy. I mentioned the check, review, approve process as being critical, moving from work in progress across to shared. We can do that. We can identify different individuals or groups who need to be involved in the process, and then we can follow the process and alert people that they haven't done something, or that an item has been rejected because it's not ready to progress. But when things are ready, then we can move them into shared following the workflow tools. And exactly the same way we can do similarly for the review authorize, moving from shared into published state. Again, set it up to identify the actors who need to get involved, follow the process, and information will only flow into publish when it's fit for purpose and has been checked by the appropriate parties. If we just look at BIM 360 docs, how can it operate as a common data environment? Well, frankly, it can do it as a one-stop shop. So we could have the entire project group working within BIM 360 docs. And the only thing I'm trying to highlight here is that you should control the unique access rights within each of the areas. So the work in progress should remain private to the different task teams. Obviously, contracts might permit access for other parties, but really, you don't typically want to reveal your kind of all of your drafts to competing organizations or perhaps your client. So we can absolutely set up unique access permissions to the different work in progress, shared and published areas. And as I mentioned, in the actual standard, the CDE only requires an archive, so that audit trail to be available for shared and published. But as I showed you earlier, it is available in work in progress if you're already working in the BIM 360 toolkit. We can even go a few steps further and really accelerate how you operate, because BIM 360 design and our integration with Esri means that we don't even need to necessarily take reference data. We can actually all collaborate, and this does mean that people should have full access to an area. But we can actually pull Esri data direct into some of our civil engineering design tools, and then people using BIM 360 design for Civil 3D or Revit, as well as integrating things like IFC open data formats, can all collaborate together, effectively sharing the live information. Now, this does have the caveat of you need to make sure that you're all contractually okay to do this, because I'm going to be working on your model perhaps live, but it can rapidly speed up the project process where everyone is concurrently working together and publishing information. It's not restricted to only working within BIM 360 docs as a kind of a unique CDE. We've got some great tools as well to help you share information with a third-party CDE. So something maybe like the client uses SharePoint and you want to get data into SharePoint. Well, we can go through the process, and at the point when we've approved data for publication, using the Autodesk Construction Cloud Connect, effectively we just publish it into BIM 360 design in a special area, and then it will automatically appear using the Autodesk Construction Cloud Connect in the third-party CDE. Now, it does depend on the third-party technology supporting a particular technology stack called Workato, but certainly there are things like Box, and as I mentioned, SharePoint, and a number of other technologies that are already in that. So it can, again, help you quickly move information through a control process into a different system. And yes, and the process continues. So one other thing just to quickly mention around the ISO 19650 standards is that there are some complexities that can become uncovered where you need to maybe check, is the data fit for purpose? Because in the EIR, you want to make sure it's in the right format and has the right level of completeness, or that you're using certain classifications. And we can do things here. So we can help with task information delivery plans. We can help with exporting a subset of IFC called COBE, which a client might demand as a data format. We can do model checking to make sure it's ready for the different stage gates. We can even pull title block data from Revit into BIM 360, so we're automatically populating fields using OCR. Civil 3D, we can support classification with model objects, and we can take COBE even out of Navisworks, and we can really manage and can help control the process using numerous tools. And I'll come back to where you can download these, but some of them are already now native within the Revit portfolio in particular. So moving then really rapidly to talking about some resources and services. So resources, well, Autodesk has a huge range of employees that we can help our customers with, as do our partners such as Baker Baynes. So some of these roles will be very equivalent within companies like Baker Baynes, where they can help you depending on your need and the type of engagement you'd want with us to support you in an adoption process. And actually, when it comes to the services, we will, Autodesk and its partners, really try and give you three flavors of service. One is the agile one. Let's help you on the fly. You've got us coming in to deliver a project that you've just suddenly been told it's got to be an ISO 19650. Well, we can do that. We can also be innovative and come up with a new way of working that your competitors haven't got, that might accelerate how you deliver. Perhaps using that BIM 360 design within the CDE workflow would do that. Or a holistic one, saying, how can I help you transform your business from being a kind of ISO 19650 newbie to a highly performing ISO 19650 business. And obviously we do this through different resources that we talked about earlier. So we'd have business consultants come in to first understand your problem and architect a solution with you using our solution architects, and then go ahead and deliver it through implementation people. And I know Baker Baynes are very happy to work in this exact same way with you. And obviously, I mentioned that Autodesk does this, but we also do this through our partner network in the main. And so whether you're working in Europe, South Africa, or elsewhere, we've got partners that can help. And we've also got affiliates who also provide things like training services. A lot of these are online. And some of these service providers are also the people that helped author the ISO 19650 guidance itself. So we can bring you in the real domain experts, should you want that, to get that independent insight into how do you do this. So really, I'm going to finish now by talking about some very simple next steps, a call to action for you. Don't ignore ISO 19650. It is coming, whether you like it or not. So, I'd say go and embrace the opportunity. First place, of course, review those standards and the guidance itself to help you understand how this all works and what it might mean to you. Please also reach out to experts for some support, whether it's us directly through partners like Baker Baynes, or we can also put you in touch with those industry experts, as I mentioned just now. So, you don't have to do this all on your own. First thing, I would always say, implement a CDE to address those information management needs. That's absolutely point or step number one. Just get a common data environment in there, try it out, pilot it, get it working. You're not going to get it perfect first time out, I can guarantee it. But kind of review and refine your process so that you get better and better. And eventually, there'll be a point where you go, this is so much better than we used to work, where we're making fewer errors, we're starting to win work from clients that we never could before. And that's because you're working in this ISO 19650 process. And I'm going to leave you just with a few links, and I know that we'll be able to share this with you after the session. But please go to the UK BIM Framework website, where you can download guidance around the ISO 19650 series and some of the old UK standards as well. Obviously, Autodesk has a number of websites, particularly the BIM 360 one with a raft of information. I showed you those BIM interoperability tools. There is a website, imaginatively named biminteroperabilitytools.com, where you can download plugins for a number of our tools. And of course, liaise with our partners like Baker Baynes, who can help you on your digital transformation. And finally, you will unfortunately have to go and buy the ISO standard. So please go out there to the ISO website and download ISO 19650 Part 1 and 2. I would highly recommend. With that, I think you'll be pleased to know I'm happy to end my presentation.
Great. Marek, thank you very much. Before we jump onto the next bit, I want to actually open up for questions. So for all of the attendees, you can go and type in questions in the chat, in the question box, and I will ask Marek that. But while I give you a chance to check that, Marek, I actually have a question for you. And someone looking at this who's perhaps already running a project and already has BIM 360 in place, is it too late for them to readjust things to be more in line with the guidelines from the standard?
Yeah, excellent question. I think the answer is probably no. I think you can, of course, augment what you're already doing with some of the ISO 19650 processes. I'd certainly introduce those check, review, approve procedures, because all that is doing is it's giving you the confidence that I'm not sharing something for the wrong intent at the wrong time. So I know we want to get things out off the desk as fast as possible, but let's build in some of these checks and balances so that we've got that audit trail to demonstrate that yes, I was sharing something because my manager or the design team lead said it's fit for purpose, and that I think will give everybody confidence that they're using the right information at the right time. So I think just enhance the BIM 360 docs that you're using today on projects, and of course set up templates for future projects as well.
Great, thank you very much. Question box. Let's get going, guys. I mean, I can keep Marek busy with questions for the next hour, but it's not about me today. Let's see. Okay, Marek, while they're typing, I have one more for you. I know that some of our clients are slightly familiar with the BS 1192 standards. In layman's terms, how does that and the types of naming conventions that it provides guidelines to fit into what the ISO standard now includes?
No, great question. I didn't cover it deliberately in as much as the 1192 series was developed with a very UK-centric perspective. ISO 19650 has tried to be more embracing of global requirements, and so what we took out is the very prescriptive container naming conventions and those status codes that we've got. We've reintroduced them with the national annex in the British standards version of ISO 19650. So if you're already following that, then absolutely carry on doing that. It's a good, robust convention, but what we're not wanting to do is that the ISO 19650 imposes something on a region where some of the terminology may be unfamiliar, maybe to do with language or geographic norms. So what's happening, I know, is that other countries are developing their own national annexes with their own conventions. But please carry on using the 1192 approach if that's what you're familiar with.
Thank you. I don't actually see any other questions other than slight technical questions, but I don't think it's really related to the content. We will have, if anything else, for the attendees, if anything else pops up during the next 20 minutes to half an hour of the presentation, you can go and put that into the chat box and we can address that at the end. Marek, thank you very much for sharing that with us. Standards aren't always the most interesting and exciting thing to hear about in a presentation, and you've managed to spice it up a bit. So thank you very much for that.
Okay, thank you.
Going to start sharing my screen again. There you go. Great, guys. On to the next bit. And this next bit, before I hand over to Nuran, is really trying to have a look at some of what Marek has just covered to see how you can put it more into practice if you are already using BIM 360 as a common data environment. So I've got Anine with me. She's one of our Baker Baynes specialists based in Gauteng, mostly focusing on the building industry. Professional architect, likes running, has traveled a bit, always dresses very well. So that will give you a little bit of an idea of her. And then we also have Nuran Ibrahim in Cape Town, who's our BIM specialist there. She comes from a structural background, done her master's in structural engineering. Also a math and physics tutor, so if any of you have children who might need some help in that department, she's a very good tutor, and also apparently cooks very well. But I haven't been fortunate enough to meet her in person yet. So one day when we can all travel again, I'll make sure that she has some nice treats for us. But I'm going to kick this new session off by changing over to Nuran to take us through some of the BIM 360 docs elements in action. Great, Nuran. We can see your desktop, so you're in the right direction. There
And
you
can
go.
you hear me as well?
And I can hear you clearly. I hope everyone else can too.
Okay, I want to just make sure you guys can see the right screen. Okay.
There you go. Perfect. Over to you,
Okay,
Nuran.
awesome. So good morning, everyone. And thanks, Jani, for advertising Anin and my specialities outside of work. Just want to make sure that I can, oops. Okay, let me just do this and this. Okay, good morning. So I will talk about BIM 360 docs and basically how this can be used in practice for effective document control that's in line with the ISO standards, as Marek was talking about. So I'll start off just by talking about what a common data environment is and how BIM 360 docs serves as a common data environment. Or CDE for short. So a common data environment is nothing new, and it can be digital or non-digital, like the good old filing cabinet. Teams may also use a combination of digital or non-digital filing systems for the document management, like making use of a server or FTP site or box filing for older records. But whatever it is, ISO 19650 requires any project team to have one common data environment, just as long as the information is accessible throughout the life cycle of a project and a record is created. So an internal team might have their own unique filing system, and this information is typically shared between project members via email. This is traditionally the case, but it can become easy to lose track of or miss important information. So BIM 360 Docs is basically a filing cabinet in the cloud, and it has some really cool features. But most importantly, it streamlines the way that we share information with each other. Using docs as a common data environment also then just allows the project team to have one source of truth for all the documents, and everyone in the team is able to access the latest information at any time and anywhere. So there's no need to search for an email that you weren't even copied into. Just yesterday in one of our training sessions, we had a QS who said she was quite excited to start making use of docs because she says the consultants always forget to copy the QS in emails. So I know I've been guilty of this, but with BIM docs, this wouldn't necessarily be the case. In addition to that, the platform is especially useful because the features and functionality are aligned with the ISO guidelines, and the teams are then able to align their workflow with ISO 19650 and also score some nice points in their ISO audits for document management. And then this also relates to why this topic is of value in the first place and why we are presenting it today. Because quality control and document management, it always seems like a secondary task to designing or drafting, but effectively quality control and document management ultimately improves the efficiency of the team, and it mitigates mistakes and rework, and also importantly, it provides a transparent paper trail that might be useful in the event of litigation. So how does BIM 360 Docs help with all of this? So we've already looked at BIM 360 Docs as a common data environment. Next, I'll talk about some of the functionalities of BIM 360 Docs and how it can be used to align your workflow with the ISO guidelines that Marek presented earlier. So I'll just touch on the 4 states of the common data environment and then look at the folder structure and how it can be set up to suit these states. I'll also discuss how ISO 19650 deals with file naming, which they refer to as unique information container identification. And then I'll demonstrate how Docs has a automatic version control. So you can control who has access and permission to view the documents that are uploaded. Anin will then take over and she will talk about moving documents between the various states, and she'll also demonstrate the approval workflow and how you can set that up. She'll show you also how you can add attributes and edit the attributes, and how BIM 360 docs can be used for unified coordination. And then she'll also show the audit trail that is continuously being recorded. So if we recall Marek's presentation, we talked about how information moves from state to state during the lifecycle of the project. The 4 states are work in progress, shared, published, and archived. So previously this was referred to as suitability, and it's easy to remember because it basically just tells you what this bit of information is suitable for. So work in progress will basically tell us that the information stored here is typically your working files, and it's suitable for internal use only. And then once it's ready to be shared with the rest of the team, it moves to the shared state, meaning this is suitable for information, for coordination, or for approval, as we more commonly know it in practice. And then later on in the project, this information could move to the published state, where it would be more suitable for tender or for construction. And then after construction, it would move to the archive state, and the information stored here would be like your as-built drawings or perhaps other handover information. So these states would differ from project to project. Some projects might not have a tender stage. Some drawings would not necessarily be issued for coordination, but the bulk of building information will always develop through these states as the project progresses. And BIM 360 docs is especially useful on projects where there is a strict and defined review and approval process. Anine will talk about that in a little bit more detail later on. So I'll just continue with how docs facilitates some of the other standards. So this is a snip of a sample project on BIM docs. This is typically how a folder structure would look and how you can set it up to be in line with the ISO standard. The project folder is typically set up with a plans and a project file folder as parent folders. And then each of these are broken down to the various states. That's your work in progress, your shared, published, and archived. So ultimately, it's up to the team how you wish to manage and use this project folder, but these stamps are the more well-known ones and categorized according to the standard. So coming back to the plans and the project files parent folders, we always advise teams to think of the plans folder as the folder where all the plans that would be issued to site would be uploaded. And then the project files folder would be all of the rest of the building information that needs to be shared amongst the project team, such as specifications or even site instructions or test results. But it's virtually any kind of document that you would traditionally send by email. So the reason that these folders are broken up is because uploading a drawing to the plans folder allows you to use an automated extraction tool that uses optical character recognition to read some of the information from the title block and then automatically populate it in the docs environment with the information in the title block. So I'll just show a quick demonstration. So let's say an electrical engineer wanted to upload some lighting layouts for information. He'll navigate to the folder, select the drawings that he wants to upload them, and then Docs has this extraction tool where you have to select a template that has been previously defined right at the beginning of the project. And this template, basically, you define where Docs has to go and like where the title block is and what information to read from the title block. And then you'll see in this case, the number and the title was directly extracted from the title block. You can then publish the drawings. And then you can see that the information has been populated automatically. And it also includes a timestamp, who updated it, and the version of the drawing. So this is one of my favorite features of BIM docs. It's quite useful, especially if you have to upload 20 drawings at one time. You would also notice that there's no revision there's no revision number in the name, and that the name of the drawing is also really long. Some of you might be familiar with this convention, but it's basically just a file naming convention that's in accordance with the standard, and it should be adopted by all the disciplines on project, but also agreed upon before the time. So the name of a file might look something like this. The standard recommends using metadata to define unique container information identification. That is just ISO jargon for saying that the naming convention should consist of a string of codes that gives us information about where the drawing is applicable and who the drawing is from. So in the case of this drawing with this title, SAM represents the name of the project, sample project, and SST represents the name of the company who issued this drawing, simple structures. These codes should be agreed upon at the beginning and also limited to 3 or 4 characters. And then the next code in the name refers to the zone that this drawing covers. In this case, the drawing is applicable site-wide. It's on the foundation level. ST refers to the discipline, structures, and DR tells us that it's a drawing. The naming convention would be used for all other types of documents as well. So M3 tells us that it's a 3D model. RP would tell us that this document is a report, for example. So next on the drawing number is the actual number, which would be sequential as drawings are being issued. And the last part is the state. In this case, it's S2, which tells us that this drawing is for information. So as the project progresses, this drawing might be issued for construction, and then the state would then become a D4 drawing. So it's optional to include this in the name, but it should still form part of the identification of this drawing somewhere on the title block, just to make it clear what this drawing is supposed to be used for. So just also, as Marek said, keep in mind that this is just a guideline, and there are some variations out there. This one over here is actually a mix of 19650 and one of the older standards, but more important than having an exact sort of sequence of the naming is that everybody agrees on it and that everybody remains consistent with their approach. This is a typical breakdown of how a file name is put together, and this will be stipulated in the BIM execution plan. And then also note that a model won't necessarily include a document number or state, for example, but this will be detailed in the BIM execution plan as well. So according to the standard, this name represents an information container. So the naming convention is encouraged because if anyone from the project team picks up any kind of document, they will be able to know immediately where it came from and what is inside the document, what it should be used for before actually opening the document. So if you imagine that the name of this drawing or this drawing is a container of information representing the drawing, then multiple drawings would basically make up the information pack, whether it is for construction or for information, whatever the case. So you would have noticed that there is no revision in the name. This is a deliberate exclusion because BIM 360 allows for easy and automated version control. The version control works for all files, save file types, and it is important that the file names are exactly the same so that Docs recognizes that it is the same drawing and only the revision is being updated. This is another reason why you have to get the file naming right from the beginning. It should also contain no date. That's also something that's quite common. So that should be left out. But it's no longer necessary because of the automatic version control. So you can see here that drawings have just been dragged and dropped or uploaded, and automatically the version number was increased. So now that the documents are uploaded onto the platform, let's look at how the permissions and controls can be set. So Docs allows the project admins to set permission levels to manage who will be able to see what on the platform. So if there was some confidential information, this folder could be restricted to certain team members. Some information might only be applicable to some team members. For example, the contractor could have a folder where he saves all the concrete test results for the structural engineer to review. This won't be relevant to any of the other disciplines, so this folder will then only be visible by the structural engineer. Docs has a nice way of administering this by allowing batch controls, where the admin can set permissions by company or roles. So this, for example, is a snip from Docs that shows the different permission levels. You can see that everybody that's been assigned the role team, so all the consultants and perhaps the contractor, has permission to view and download, but not to upload anything. So in this instance, this is a civil folder. So we want to allow everybody from the company, CE Civils, to be able to upload as well. And then if Otto de Villiers were, for example, the document control lead on the civil team, only he would be able to add folders or rename folders or delete folders, for example. And the project admins always have full folder control. So they are able to do all of the above as well as assign and reassign permissions. So this will be set up from the beginning of the project and it will be agreed upon by everyone. It can also be updated and edited as the project goes along. And then just one other thing to mention is something that's also new to Docs, is that that Docs now allows information to be shared with members outside of the project team. So these are members who do not have access to Docs, but certain files can be shared with them. So for example, subcontractors who only need some of the information at one stage of the project. So that's quite nice. You don't then have to switch between having to use Docs and like an email filing system. You can also just grant outsiders access for a period of time. So that's it from me. I'll now hand over to Anin and she will talk about moving information between states.
Great, thanks, Nuran. I'm just going to take back the screen here and make sure that you are all looking at the correct screen. All right. There you go. Over to you, Anin.
Thanks, Jani, and thanks, Nuran. So when we talk about moving containers of information between states, say for instance from work in progress to shared, it requires the use of a check, review and approve process, as well as a review, authorize and accept process at the other end. Now, within BIM 360 Docs, this is done by means of setting up approval workflows as it's essential for quality control. Okay, so it's not enough to just assume that the file of information is correct and up to the required standard. You need a formal review process in order to be confident that all your information is accurate. Okay, just a note then that only project administrators can create, edit and manage approval workflows. So to create an approval workflow, you go to your project admin module and under services, within your document management folder, under reviews, you can select to create an approval workflow. You also have various templates that you can choose from, and they range from 1 step to a 6-step approval. And you also have a 2, 3, and a 4-step group approval should you have groups of multiple reviewers that has to be part of the approval process. Okay, so now that your approval process has been set up, the process is started by the initiator selecting the files from the relevant folder, and he then submits it for a review. Okay, so then he selects the type of approval workflow, and here we can see that this is a 3-step process. We can also see the documents, and it's then submitted for a review. You will then get a message telling you your review is being initiated and that email notifications will be sent when the review is ready. So you can then specify the reviewers that needs to be. Also, there's a time allocated to it, and you may want to include some project members as well, and they will be able to read comments of the review And if you want, include a message as well. Okay, so you will send that. And if we then go back to our review log, we can now see that our review has been initiated, and the next action will then be from the first reviewer. We can also see that the status is open. So the first reviewer then starts the review. He looks at the documents and he may want to add some comments. He can do so. He may say something like initial check and ready for review. So once he's done that, he can just say add, and we can see that a comment has been added. Okay, so he submits it for a review. He may want to add notes as well and submit it. So once that is done, he also needs to specify the reviewer to be notified, maybe add some project members as well, and include a message if he wants. He sends it, and then the second reviewer starts his process. Once again, you can add some comments if you want. Okay, you can maybe say the review is now done. It's now ready for approval. Okay, he submits his review. Add a note if you want, submit it. And then the third reviewer, he also needs to specify who it is, also include project members if he wants, and sends it. So the last step in this process is then the third reviewer. He needs to approve the documents, and this reviewer is taking his time of approving it. And once he's satisfied that everything is correct and up to standard, he can then also maybe add some comments if he wants. Just note that this process can be used for other approvals as well. He can add a comment, he can say it's approved, it's ready for coordination. And he will also then need to update the approval status. We set it to approved if he's satisfied, and he submits his review. Okay, you can once again add notes. And once this has been done, we can see that the status of this review is closed and the review is now complete. There you go. Okay, so once you have set your, let's just skip to my next slide. Okay, so how do we then apply unique container identification in BIM 360? You'll need to set up a schema of metadata, and this is done by adding attributes. It has been touched on earlier on, but you can then customize your document information with it. So essentially, attributes gives you more information about a file than just its name. Okay, so looking at the process of adding some attributes, you'll need to be in your document management module. And within your, let's just start that one, document management module, going to your folders, that's where you will start. So say you start at a parent folder level. Looking over there, we can see that there's already some default attributes added. So if you want to add additional ones, you can select the gear icon and select add attribute. But just note that if you apply or add an attribute at a parent folder, it would be carried across to your other subfolders as well. But you may only want to add an attribute to a subfolder, and you can do that by clicking the three dots and selecting add attributes from your drop-down list. Or alternatively, you can go back to your gear icon and say add attribute. Okay, so here you start specifying your name for it. In this scenario, you used a revision. You can insert a text field. Okay, and once that has been done, going back to our view list, we can see our attribute has been added. So if we now select our file, we can start adding a value for it. And in this example, P01.02 to align it with ISO standards. Okay, so if we look in another subfolder, we can see that this attribute has not been added here. Okay, so you can then continue adding attributes if you want, specifically if you're working in line with your ISO standards, and also when using the BS 1192 naming convention. So as a last example, say maybe you want to add a contributor, you can just say add attribute again, specify your name, and maybe for this one you want to use your drop-down menu to make it easier, and you can start adding values in the fields. I'm adding an architect as a contributor, as well as MEP, and yeah, maybe structure as well. Okay, so just once we've done that, we can now see that your contributor attribute has been added. So just one last thing on attributes. Like we said earlier, you can also, when uploading to plan folders, you can set up your title block extraction. And from there, it will pull automatically information for your attributes. So say, for instance, it has a revision on your title block, it will also pick it up in your attribute. Okay, so then last thing, you can also edit your attribute values to match the information in your naming convention. And it's also a good idea to create a drop-down menu with all your codes. So basically attributes is another way of searching for information. Okay, so I'm giving over to Jani to just end us off.
We're not that socially distant today. So yeah, we find that specifically around these attributes, Nuran showed a bunch of codes earlier, and you know, if you're new to these codes, it makes more sense to have a drop down, then you know which one to choose. But if one of these codes from your naming convention is already on your title blocks, if you upload it to the plans folder, it will automatically populate everything in there. And then another nice thing to just also add to the approval workflows, like Marek had showed, there's these approval workflows that needs to take a document from one state, like work in progress, to shared with that approval process. Like Anin had showed, once the approver says, yes, I've approved it, that document can automatically move to the right location. Then as we're getting closer to the end of our presentation, part of what the standard also say that should be part of your information management is that you need to be able to coordinate and work together. So really from a BIM 360 point of view, we're trying to avoid issues like these, ideally before they're actually installed. The file versioning, like they mentioned, and specifically using a naming convention, is so that we don't have this type of file naming. I'm sure if I had to go into any of your personal folders, this is typically the thing we find where, you know, some people don't really understand the definition of what a final is. And then lastly, markups. You know, we've all seen this before, but these markups can now be done on BIM 360. So from an issue point of view, issues can be created on the BIM 360 platform, and these issues can be pinpointed to specific locations in the project. But these issues aren't only related to things like the design and coordination. It could be a multiple different type of issues. It could be field issues, you know, coordination issues, design issues. And in some of our projects, if someone if it's a training project and someone hasn't followed the training instructions correctly, we can have our own Baker Baynes created custom issue. And then also the markups, and hopefully in this case you can add text to the markup so that we don't have people cutting out clouds in concrete slabs. Works really well if you've got an iPad or one of the iPad Pros with a pen, because then it kind of feels like you're doing it on paper. Lastly, Marek had also spoken about it. There's been a lot of communication around the audit trail, very important. It's like a paper trail, but it's digital, so it's even better than a paper trail because paper trails can be shredded. Keeps note of who did what, when, and there. Great for clients, great for anyone else. Should you get into a dispute, everything is on BIM 360. And then also BIM 360 has the document log, which is similar to a drawing register, but it gives you another log of how information was uploaded. And luckily, this has been changed and improved slightly in the last couple of months to make it a little bit more user-friendly. But like Marek said earlier, I'm really looking forward to Autodesk University at the end of the year, because hopefully there'll be some nice new updated features coming out from a BIM 360 point of view. Okay, we have about 5 minutes left, and that means that we are pretty much running on time so far. We'll be done in 5 minutes, but I wanted to just give everyone on the call another opportunity to ask any questions. So you can go and put that in the question box or the chat box. I'm not sure which one you guys can see, to just check if you have any questions to let me know. While you're thinking of questions, if you don't quite want to go and buy the ISO standard immediately, what we will share after this event is what the UK BIM framework has put together is a summary. I think one is about a 66-page summary, so it's a lengthy summary, but it is a very nice summary of the ISO standard if you want to just go and read up a little bit more about it and get an understanding of, you know, how can you start using it. Also send it to the client so that they can also see that they play a role in this. Great, so I'm just checking the question box here to see if there's anything else that popped up. Yes, this presentation has been recorded and will be on our YouTube channel so that you can share it with anyone else if you wanted to. Then also I see something else here. I think that the ISO standard, and you know, this is probably that Marek is the expert on that, but it's not just for buildings. It basically, this type of same workflow can work on any kind of built asset. So if you were building a factory or a plant or a dam or a bridge, you can still very much follow these guidelines and still make use of a common data environment like BIM 360. Great, thanks everyone. So just from our side, in closing, maybe you had the question of, well, it's nice, how can Baynes help me to make this work? A lot of you on this call are already very familiar with what it is and what we do, and some might think you're very familiar, but let me just give you a overview. So really, myself as well as my team, Nuran and Anin on this call, mainly focus on the business process consulting point of view. This is where we engage with you in terms of resources and services, like implementing using guidelines like the ISO in your organization. Your survey and design side, Scan to BIM, Leica, all of the cool, nice tech is another part of it. The design software, providing the tools that we've spoken about, and then also providing blended learning, because different people learn in different ways, so that if we go, here's the standard, here's your processes, here's your platform, that you actually know how to go and use that. And like I mentioned, the ISO standard, as well as the types of services that we offer from a Baker Baynes point of view, is not just for the building industry. It is also for civil, energy, and process plant, as well as manufacturing. And, you know, 4 of those could definitely also do with the ISO standard. Manufacturing, slight components, maybe not so much. We use a very similar approach to Autodesk in terms of the way that we engage, but we have a much bigger consulting framework that sits behind that, which is our IODOC methodology. Some of you might have seen this before. There is a framework behind this, but this is basically saying, like Marek had mentioned earlier, there's the quick once-off, we need to fix something and get up and going. There's more of the customized, how can I make ISO work for my practice, and then a holistic approach. And all of this is worked through with you in our IODOC framework, where we start by assessing, you know, what is the need? What do we need to do to actually help you solve your problems and meet the purpose of adopting this or changing the way you work in the first place. Great, guys, that actually brings us to an end. if you wanted to contact any of our, if I had to use the Autodesk term, business consultants or solution architects, that would be Jackie in Cape Town, who some of you have met, or myself. Our details are also here. I think a lot of you might have that already. You can also engage with us online, where you'll find a link to this presentation from next week. And I just want to thank everyone for joining us on Friday, and for hopefully staying awake. And I hope that you've all learned something about this standard, and I look forward to engaging with you all about how we can actually put it in practice and make it work. So thanks everyone. That brings us to an end today. If you still have a question that just popped up, I will hang around for probably another 2 minutes to answer that question. And I know that Marek is also probably listening with half an ear. He had another engagement to get to. But Marek, if you're hearing this, thank you very much for joining us today, and thank you very much for sharing your insight on BIM standards and the ISO standard and why we need it and how we can use it. Cheers, everyone.